restoring Illinois to greatness. This is Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute and hosted by AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with Pat Hughes, the co-founder of the Illinois Opportunity Project. And Pat, other developments this week. Governor Rauner issued a statement suggesting that he didn't know if future bargaining sessions with AFSCME, the state's largest public sector union, representing almost 40,000 state employees, didn't know if any future bargaining sessions would be productive at this point because the impasse between the two is so vast, and so vast in particular in comparison with successful collective bargaining agreements the governor has negotiated with other public sector unions representing smaller groups of state employees, like, for example, the Teamsters, who took a wage freeze. Where AFSCME is dug in on 3.8% step increases in addition to annual wage increases. So they want step increases that run almost 4 times the rate of inflation in addition to the wage increases, whereas the Teamsters, for example, took a wage freeze because they apparently understand what everybody else understands, which is the state is bankrupt. The $9 billion in unpaid bills, those are real bills. And the kind of continuing to borrow against tomorrow to pay for yesterday, that's not going to work much longer either. And so the Teamsters, to their credit, kind of bit the bullet and said, we want our members to be employed. We don't want them to be locked out. We don't want them to be riffed. AFSCME doesn't feel the need to comport with that philosophy. And so I wonder where you think this is going to go.
Oh, it's not going to go anywhere good for AFSCME. I mean, I think what the governor has shown with your example of the Teamsters, that he is willing to negotiate with these unions and cut a deal. And if everyone's reasonable on both sides, a deal can get done. Dan, this is why AFSCME and SEIU and Mike Madigan, this is why they tried to take the governor's right to negotiate these contracts away in that SB 1229 that last summer. They wanted to take his right to negotiate these contracts away for this very reason. They wanted some independent arbiter who was not independent and would be on their side to get rolled on their demands. And the governor's not getting rolled. So we're going to have a stalemate and no contract pending this. And we'll see what the reaction of AFSCME is, whether they decide to strike. They don't have the money to strike, but whether because they spend it all on politics, but whether they have the ability or willingness to call the governor's bluff.
Well, it's interesting, too, if you go through some of the terms of the agreement that was being negotiated and you just would look at AFSCME's demands. I mean, not only on the wages there, but it's little things that are indicative of big things. They want overtime to start at 37 and a half hours rather than 40 hours. And you hear some state workers will say, well, that's what it is for me, too, and I'm not a union member. Right, because they negotiate a contract like that, and then those terms bleed over into the other state workers because the state said, well, let's just treat everybody the same.
Correct.
And that adds, substantial expense, whereas everybody else living in the even privates, even union members in the private sector, tradesmen, it's much different because you actually have true adversarial bargaining in the private sector where you don't in the public sector, this agency capture of politicians negotiating with the people they finance. It's just kabuki theater. But it really is stark, and it seems to me this is an opportunity to educate the public a little bit, dispense with listening to their Workers of the World Unite rap and their, we're fighting for middle-income families, and actually look at what they're demanding from you compared to what you're making.
Yeah, I think they're just, the reason that they're unable to do that, Dan, is they're just so shocked. This is like when kids go over to grandma's house. They're so used to getting everything that they want. When the adult steps into the room, the parent steps in the room in the form of Governor Rauner and says, look, we can't do this. You can't have this anymore. They're overwhelmed. Why not? We've always had this. Why can't we continue to have it? And there's a cultural intellectual adjustment they're being forced to make as Governor Rauner stands his ground on this issue and on others, and it's just taking them time to adjust to the new reality.
What do you think about the potential? How real is it, the potential for kind of our Madison moment, and I mean Madison, Wisconsin, where you have public sector workers on strike and maybe even against the backdrop of another Chicago teacher strike on top of it, and you just have a kind of the public sector siege on Springfield and Chicago, and we just, hash this bad boy out.
I think there's a chance of that happening, and if it works for us like it did for the state of Wisconsin, I welcome it because we win on that fight.